Hi there. It's been a while since I posted to the channel, and we've got a great reason to be back at it, the release of Axial's all-new SCX10 Before we get to that, I want to take a moment to thank everybody for the incredible outpouring of support when Nick, who is my very dear friend and business partner in Bauhaus RC and Helios RC, when he passed away unexpectedly back in January. It was a very sudden and sad time for all of us, and the outpouring of support was just absolutely amazing. People who traveled from near and far to attend the funeral, the memorial service up in New Hampshire, the funeral down here in North Carolina, and the outpouring of support over Facebook and social media. We really appreciate it. Corey and Logan, Nick's wife and his son, really were blown away by it, and it meant an awful lot to them. So thank you very much for that. If Nick were here, though, he would say, okay, enough with the mushy stuff, let's get on with business. So let's do that. Let's talk about this. My headline on this one is it's much more of an evolution than it is a revolution in the scale truck scene. It brings to mass market trail trucks a combination of features that hasn't been seen, although almost all of them have been seen in one form or another on different platforms. But Axial has done a really nice job combining them all into one, and it really takes what was starting to look like a long-in-the-tooth platform with the SCX10 and puts it on par with the class leaders, the segment leaders right now. So let's talk about some of these new features and take a deeper dive into them. So first off, it is a kit. They're releasing it first as a kit. Conspiracy theorists among you might think that somebody in Horizon maybe knew what was going to happen with this coronavirus craziness and know that we were all going to be stuck at home in our garages for some time and needing projects to work on. But I will remind you that the SCX10 was released first as a kit, so I'm going to go with the no conspiracy theory on this one. I'm really glad that they did release it as a kit first. We love building in this house. It's a lot of fun to see how these things go together. It gives you a much better appreciation for the design and the engineering and some of the things about the truck that are different. So hats off to Axial for starting with the kit. That said, there are some nits to pick. I'll get into those in a few minutes. So there are some nits about how they put the kit together, but I'll start with the good stuff. Axial is finally on board with the plan of including everything you need for a component in a bag, and only what you need for that component in a bag. So when it's time to build the axles, you cut open one big bag. It has a couple smaller bags in it. Everything you need for the axles is in that bag, and when you are done with that bag, you are done with the axles. Same thing with the links, same thing with the transmission, same thing with most of the other components. It does make the kit assembly process much easier than what it had been with older generations, or for those of you who have built Tamiya kits, and I love my Tamiya kits, especially the vintage re-releases. But those, it's one part from this tree, one part from that tree, one screw from this bag, one screw from that bag. It can be quite a bit to keep up with. But Axial's done a really nice job with the packaging of the components in this kit, which does help the assembly process. So one of the stars of the show are the axles here. And the 10.3, at least the kit version now, comes with an all-new portal axle, and it does share components with the Capra portals as well as with the AR44s. So the portals themselves use the same gears and the same portal covers and the same knuckles as the Capra. So there's nice cross compatibility. If you're a fan of using brass, you can take brass portal weights from Capra and stick them on your 10.3. You can also use hardened gear sets that are available aftermarket, portal gear sets from the Capra for the 10.3. The biggest difference between the two is that the 10.3 axles are much narrower than the Capra axles, which is a good thing. There you can see the difference. And not only are they much narrower than the Capra axles, they're actually much narrower than even other portal axles on the market, like, I'll show you this top and bottom with the Traxxas TRX4, so you can see the difference in width between the SCX10 and the TRX4 portal axles. And so what that does is that really opens up some options in terms of being able to use different bodies with the 10.3 without having your axles, without having your wheels stick way outside the fenders. Axial is also using machined ring and pinion gears with the 6-bolt lockers, which are found in the Capra. It's a nice improvement to have the steel cut gears and have the 6-bolt lockers instead of the 3-bolt lockers that were in the 10.2. The 6-bolt ones are definitely more durable. Axial has indicated that they are going to be releasing a non-portal version of the axles, and so that'll be nice to see for those who don't want the portals. But these portal axles look great, and they provide just fantastic ground clearance. So let's see. Next up, the transmission. So this is really a neat bit of kit here. So what Axial has done with this transmission is they have combined 2-speed and a dig in a scale orientation with a true forward mounted motor all into a single transmission unit. So you can see through the miracles of time travel, I was up way late last night assembling my kit. You can actually see the 2-speed shifter servo right here, and then the dig servo back here at the back of the transmission. It's a really neat progression for Axial with this transmission. All of the gears are metal, but they are the sintered metal gears. They are not the cut steel gears. So if you're planning on running big power, you might want to wait until the aftermarket or Axial comes out with hardened steel gear sets for the transmission and the transfer case, because the sintered gears, under lots of power and abuse, those do have a tendency to fail. We've had that failure in our 10.2. If you're running brushed and you're not going to go crazy with it, you should be fine with the gears that we have. So the other nice thing about this transmission, the way that Axial has designed it, you can either you can use the 2-speed or the dig, or both, or neither. So you have your you have options for how you run it. You don't have to run it with the 2-speed. You don't have to run it with the dig. And they also do have an optional gear set, so they have an extra pair of gears that allow you to change the gear ratio to add even more gear reduction for non-portal axles, because the portals themselves add about 1.9 to 1 gear reduction on top of the gear reduction throughout the rest of the drivetrain. So if you end up with the non-portal version of the axles, or if you want to swap these out for AR44s and lose the portals, then you can compensate for that by adding some more gear reduction in the transmission itself, as well as if you want to change your spur and your pinion to adjust your gearing also. So that's a nice feature with the transmission. They've also done a really nice job with surfacing and detailing on the transmission. So it's a really nice setup. The other interesting thing to note on the final drive ratio is that the top gear final drive ratio is about 31 to 1, which is in the neighborhood of the original SCX10, and is a shorter gear ratio than the top gear on the TRX4. The low gear ratio is around 65 to 1. So tons of gear reduction there. And what that means is that you can run a 540 can brushed motor in this and run it in top gear and not have problems. So I would still recommend staying at 35 turn or higher. I wouldn't go down to 27 or 20. But at a 35 turn or a 5-slot 16 turn, you should be fine running a 540 can brush motor, which is something you can't do in the TRX4 with the 2-speed, because in high speed those 540 brush motors will burn up, they'll overheat. So it's a nice gear ratio spread. The gear ratio spread is not as dramatic as it is in the TRX4, but there's still a nice difference between first and second gear. So a nice job with the gearing from Axial. The chassis rails are all new. So SCX10 2 used essentially the same chassis rails as the original SCX10. These are all new chassis rails. They are adjustable in that you can adjust the length of the rails. That was a feature originally found on the Vatera Ascender, so Axial has now adopted that here. It does make it a little bit easier to set this truck up for different bodies that have different lengths and different wheelbases. Although to adjust the wheelbase you still will need to adjust your link lengths, and Axial does not include parts for different link lengths, so you would actually need to either buy different links or make your own links to adjust the lengths to match wheelbase of a different body if you're gonna switch bodies and shorten or lengthen the wheelbase. Speaking of links, one of the things that I really like about this is Axial has gone with the Capra style links. So these are very beefy steel links, and they are reverse threaded, which means that you can actually adjust the length of them if you want to by turning them while they're in place. And they've got the pass-through hole, which makes it really easy to stick a hex driver through the center of the link, and then you can put your rod ends on. Makes the whole assembly process a lot easier. So the links are nice and beefy, and they have metal pivot balls. No more plastic pivot balls like we had on the original SCX10 2 kit, so these should last a whole lot longer than the SCX10 2 rod ends, and so very happy about that. The shocks are also modeled after the shocks that you find on the stock Capra. They are emulsion style shocks, but they do have a little bleeder valve in the shock cap, and so what that does is it makes it a lot easier to fill the shock all the way up with oil, get rid of almost all of the air with the piston completely compressed, and then tighten your little grub screw, and then you can pull your piston down, and then you get a really nice smooth action out of the shock, and with almost no bubbles or no bubbles. So it's they seem to work nice and smoothly. Axial claims that they have cut down on leaks significantly, although I must say that right out of the box, the demo unit that came from the factory did have a little bit of leaking oil on one of the corners. So maybe that was an assembly issue, maybe not, I don't know. On the one that I just put together, I used a little bit of green slime, and I used 60 weight oil instead of the 35 weight that came with it, so we'll see how well they hold oil. They do seem nice and smooth, so hopefully that's going to represent an improvement over what we were used to. So another nice little touch that Axial has included is this engine cover. So it's a V8 engine cover. So my only gripe about that is if it's going to be a proper Jeep, it's got to have the Alfa Romeo engine with the Prius hybrid powertrain, the 2-liter turbo, because that's what all proper JLUs have, right? Like the one that's out there. Well, anyway, either that or a V6, but that's okay. They did include the engine cover. There's a front piece that goes over the front of the motor and also covers the front of the servo. That has all your belts and pulleys, and that looks absolutely fantastic. They did leave a cutout for the over top of the servo to accommodate taller servos, so I'm sure the aftermarket will take care of pieces that you can bolt on to cover the top of your servo that would complete the look of the V8 engine. But overall, it's a nice job. It's not near the same level of detail that you get in the SSD Trail King 3D motor, which is really more of a full motor with a full engine block. But it's a nice little touch that adds some detail to the 10.3 platform. So we do like that. I'll show you on this one. We have 2 different battery mounting options, which is also kind of nice. So on the driver's side plate and slider, you'll see a shorty battery tray that will fit a shorty pack like our Helios RC 3700 milliamp 45C 3S battery pack. We also have a 2S 5000, fits perfectly there. So any of your standard size shorty battery packs will fit fine there. And then there's also another battery tray that will fit a longer standard stick size battery pack going behind the transfer case just in front of the rear fender wells. So you've got your choice for battery mounting locations, which is a nice new feature. Let's talk about this body. So I'm partial to JLUs. I bought one last August as a daily driver for my business. I've been enjoying it, and I think Axial has done a really nice job overall with this body for a Lexan body. So first thing you'll notice is lots of molded bits. The second thing you'll notice is me trying to get this thing actually on here, which I'll talk about in a minute, because that is a little bit tedious. That's one of the things I don't like. But anyway, lots of molded bits. So door handles, side view mirrors, the fenders, the windshield wipers, the fake hood vents, which on a real JLU Rubicon are also fake, and they are black plastic, so that's quite realistic. The hood latches in back, they did a nice job with the light buckets with a little bit of, with a Sharpie, coloring the plastic pieces that would be colored on a full-size JL black. You'd have a really nice looking rear light buckets there. So lots of, and then also the spare tire delete plate that they put on the back. So they did a really nice job with the injection molded bits. They also hid the body clips. So you'll notice no body clips on the roof, no body clips on the hood. They hid them. This is one of the areas where I do have a little bit of a quibble, because they did such a good job hiding them, and with these fender flares that go flush out to the inner fenders, the body is just kind of fussy to get. I've been practicing this for like a week, and it still is a bit tedious to get the body on. And then once you get the body on, then you got to go hunting for these tiny little post holes that are set way in on either side, right behind the bumpers, on either side of the chassis rails, and they can be a little bit tough to find, especially with middle-aged eyes. So I like that they were going the route of hiding the body clips. I hate seeing body clips. I love the inner fenders. I think that's a nice touch. Nice for them to start including them on their trucks. But I would have liked to have seen them make it a little bit easier to get this on and off. For comparison, here is a TRX4 Bronco. It has inner fenders. It's got a great detailed body, and this body goes on and off much easier than the, of course, as I say that, it's going to prove me wrong, but this body goes on and off much easier than the JLU body does. So off and on, and the JLU, as many times as I try, I still can't seem to get it all the way on the first try. A little bit of a nit, not the worst issue in the world. Axial has included bead-lock wheels, which is a nice touch. If you take a look at the wheels, you'll probably recognize those as having the same faces as the 1.9 rate. But in this case, these are three-piece bead-lock wheels. They are not glue-ons like they are with the 1.9 rate. They look pretty good. And the tires are Nitto Trail Grapplers. They are, I think Axial specs them as a 4.74 inch tire. They call it R35 compound, but this does feel much stickier straight out of the box than the other R35 compound tires, especially the BF Goodrich KO2s that came on the original SCX10 to XJ. These feel really nice, and I'm sure as they break in, they're going to get better. My only quibble with the tires is that at 4.74 inches sitting on this body really is more like an 8 scale body when you measure it out. These look like 40 to 42 inch tires, not really what you normally see riding on the street. I prefer a smaller tire underneath this to look more like a 35 or a 37 would look under a JLU. And I can actually show you what that looks like, because let's put that over here. here is, these are Pitbull Braven Berserkers, and these are 4.35 inch tires. And if I can get the body on, this is the recurring theme of the day is trying to get this body off and on. You'll see that, there we go. I think we got it. Yes. Okay. And forgive the rear shocks are not loaded. This has, I think, just a much more realistic street, but also very off-road capable JL look to it than with the stock tires, which are significantly bigger. Other things that are nice about the body, if you recall the first of the hard body, I think it was, maybe it was a killer body or a Raffi body, I forget, of the JKU hard bodies that was available. The version 1 had a back door that looked like it was just a little sliver. It was too short. The proportions were all off. The proportions between the front door and the back door here are very, very close to the proportions on a full size. The behind the seat pillar, that is cut a little bit shorter than a 1-to-1 JLU would be, but not so much that it's that it jumps out at you to the naked eye. I did notice that the rear axle with the stock rear link lengths does seem like it sits a little bit aft of center. It sits a couple millimeters too far back, so I'm probably going to adjust that to get that stance to look a little bit better. The front axle looks pretty good, looks pretty close to spot on. So there you have it. That's the body. So one of the other nice, relatively new features for Axial is the inclusion of a metal steering servo arm instead of a plastic one, which is never going to be able to hold up to a decent servo that's got enough torque to handle normal trailing and crawling duties. So they do include a metal servo. It is not the clamping variety, so make sure you include your Loctite when you're putting it together so it doesn't fall out, but that is a nice touch. One thing to note about this new setup with the portal axles, Axial has included an oil pan that is part of the underside of the steering servo mount, and between that oil pan and the portal axles, there's not a whole lot of room for the suspension, main suspension components, especially the panhard and the steering servo arm. So clearance is very, very tight in there, and so it's not going to leave a whole lot of room to use other components that aren't made specifically for this application. So your favorite servo arms may or may not fit, and if you're going to try making your own links or swapping out axles that have different panhard geometry, you might end up with some clearance issues that you got to work through. So just keep an eye on that. Forgot to mention one of the other features that I do like is Axial includes a metal motor plate with the SCX10 and that motor plate has discrete holes to help you position your motor for proper mesh based on the size of the pinion that you're going to be running. It makes it very easy to get that set up properly, get that all installed. So that is a neat little feature. The inner fenders, another neat little bit with the inner fenders is that they do include slots for LED lights, rock lights. Apparently Axial's planning on releasing them. I'm sure other folks will release them as well. Rock lights are fun. They're even more fun if they are color shifting rock lights, like the KC Highlights rock lights that I have on the big Jeep out there. So that's also a nice little touch that I'm sure people are going to be able to have a good time with. So there are some quibbles, and so it's worth going through those. I think first and foremost with the kit, I also saw this with the SMT10 kit, which I just recently built within the last few weeks. Axial, there's some errors in the instructions, and on the one hand I get that it happens, but at the same time Traxxas, which isn't even really known as a kit company, their instructions are spot on for the TRX4 kits, for the Stampede 4x4 kit, which Ru just built. They do a really terrific job with the instructions. I would just love to see Axial take more time and proofread those instructions to make sure that they're correct and that they catch the errors, just to make that build process easier, especially for people who may be new to building. If you're an experienced builder, you'll be able to figure it all out. It's not that big a deal. But if you're new to building, there may be some places where you scratch your head and wonder why a particular screw size doesn't seem to be included in the bag for that component. The right screw size is there. It's just a typo in the instructions, and there are some other errors in the instructions as well. So take your time, and you can figure it out. The steering servo mount is a bit funky. Axial, for some reason, just did not include enough clearance to fit most standard size servos, and so if you're going to use something other than a Spectrum servo, there's a good chance you're going to have to notch out 2 corners of the steering servo mount just to allow that servo to clear and sit all the way down where it's supposed to. So not a big deal. It's something you can do with just a utility knife. It takes a couple of minutes. Not hard to do, but just be aware of that. The shift and the dig servo geometry is really tight. They don't use a standard horn. They use essentially a slotted horn, and so there's a shaft that slides freely in the slotted horn. So as the horn moves, that shaft can slide in there. So might limit your options for aftermarket servos and servo savers and servo arms. The simplest thing to do is just to go with the Spectrum servo that Axial recommends, but if you're going to try something different, then you may have to do some fiddling with it to get it to all work. The last nit to pick involves the receiver box. So as with the 10.2, Axial has included a sealed receiver box. In the 10.2, the receiver box was molded into the side plate on the passenger side. In the 10.3, this is a removable receiver box that is intended to be installed on the passenger side. But also like the 10.2, this receiver box includes a U-shaped silicone grommet with pass-through for your servo wires, and as with the 10.2, that grommet includes space for 3 servo wires. But if you're going to take advantage of all the great features in the new 10.3, you need more than 3 wires. You need one for the ESC, one for the steering servo, and one for each of the shift and dig servos. That's 4, and you've only got pass-throughs for 3 wires, which means if you stuff a 4th wire in there, that grommet isn't going to seal. So it's no longer a sealed receiver box if you're using all of the features. So a nice idea from Axial, but the execution was a bit lacking. As you can tell from the list of nits and gripes, they're really relatively small. They're not going to stop you from enjoying this truck. Overall, Axial has done a really nice job. The combination of features is excellent. The quality of the materials is a big step up from what we've seen from Axial in the past. So that's also an area of improvement. Overall, they've done a great job with the 10.3. If this is something that has piqued your interest, you should definitely get one. You're going to enjoy it. One thing to keep in mind if you are going to pull the trigger is that the early production versions have experienced some of the missing parts issues that we saw with the release of the 10.2. Derek's 10.3 kit, which he got at the same time that I got mine, was missing one of the pieces of the transmission housing. Horizon has been very good about replacing missing pieces, but sometimes it can take a few weeks depending on where you're located and which part you're missing for you to get the replacement in hand. If that's the kind of thing that's really going to frustrate you, just wait for a couple of months, let the first production run get off the shelves. They'll be selling out pretty quickly, I am sure, and I'm sure that Horizon will fix that issue in their supply chain and make sure that they've got all the parts in the kits. Interesting to note that at getting to the point of having an actual roller here, I did not use the stock wheels and tires on mine, and I hadn't put the body together. The sum total of spare parts left over are a 23 tooth servo arm, because I used the 25 tooth, the 2 spacers to lock out the shift and dig servos. Didn't use the lockouts because I'm actually using the 2-speed and the dig, and then one little spacer that's intended to go in that grommet in case you're only going to use 2 of the 3 servo wire pass-throughs in the going into the receiver box. So there are not many spares. In fact, there really aren't any spares included in the kit, but I didn't have any missing parts, and I'm sure that most of them are fine. But like I said, if that's going to bother you, just hang tight for a month or 2, and I'm sure that at that point the kits that are on the shelves will be just fine. What's next? I have some video that I shot using the demo truck that Hangar 18 Hobbies got from Horizon. I will be getting that video together along with first driving impressions. Hopefully we'll have that up on the channel by this weekend. The spoiler alert is that overall it drives very well. There are going to be a couple of areas for improvement, as there always are with these things, but overall it's a very good drive, and I was very impressed with the performance. So thank you for watching. I'm going to leave you with some footage that I found of Nick as I was going through videos, and I thought it provided a nice little tribute and memorial of our dear friend and my business partner, and so I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks.
Whew. I'm actually working a little bit here, so this is a treat for you guys. I usually sit around and, well, try to sit around and be boring and relax. It's a little bit more video of Nick, usually. A little bit more video of Nick trying to walk down the trail here, not following my butt. This was really slick yesterday. There's a combination of clay, some leaves, all that together was nuts. The funny part is the tiny trucks, they made it no problem. Tiny trucks made it, and scale humans didn't. You know, I didn't realize how exhausting it is taking video. I commend Will Be Wise. That skinny guy there running around, jumping on rocks. I'm winded just running up the hill. Nah, not really. Well, I'm winded from running the entire course. Okay, trying to find course 3. Don't know where it is. Doug said to go around the corner. There's 6 people here. My guess is there's 6. I don't know. I would consider maybe we're less competent than. If our wives were here, they could find it, but they're not. Yesterday was a little rainy. Day before was a little rainy. Hurricane Matthew was visiting us, so we thank him for leaving and giving us these beautiful, beautiful blue skies. There isn't even a cloud up there, so this is beautiful.